Hello, everyone, and welcome to another panel of the Luso-American Education Foundation Conference, the 47th annual Luso-American Education Foundation Conference for the last 4 years, hosted by PBBI at Fresno State. I keep on saying it's my last one, and one of these days it will be. We are online now, and of course, part of our mission, as all of you know, at the Portuguese Beyond Borders Institute at California State University, Fresno, is to continue this dialogue within the Portuguese-American community. Our theme is, of course, registering our stories and creating our very own narrative. And so that is basically, oops, there we go, my phone going off. That's great. So here we are with another panel. We have 3 of them today. We just finished a literary panel for those of you who are following us. And then, of course, we have this one. And then we have another one this evening on Portuguese language teaching. We are very, very happy that we have these 3 invited guests here with us. We are very, very happy to talk about this theme, which is basically the community that we all work for, the community that we all work, that we all have given countless hours, I think, but nobody is complaining. We just want to have this conversation. So first and foremost, I want to thank Jerry and Tisha and Monique, I should say Dr. Monique, Madam Doctor, as I call her, and all 3 of them for their time and their, first of all, the time today, but also on behalf of the Portuguese-American community, and certainly on behalf of PBBI at Fresno State. Thank you for all you do on a constant basis for the community and have done for a while. So if you'll take about 2 or 3 minutes kind of to give a brief bio about yourself and your involvement with the Portuguese-American community. We'll start here locally with my neighbor and cousin here in my prima in Selma, Tisha.
Hello, good afternoon. So yes, I am Tisha Cardoza. I am from Selma, California. My involvement with the Portuguese community is I am a past Grand President of the SPRSI, Sociedade Portuguesa Reina Santa Isabel. I am also currently the chairman of the board for the Grand Council of the Brotherhood of St. Anthony. I am active in the Selma Portuguese and Azores Association. That is our Selma Portuguese Hall. I'm a director, a past president, currently also run the bar there. And in general, I'm a member of all the other Portuguese fraternal benefit societies, PFSA, Luso, Cabrillo, Civics Club of California, etc. And I've always, I'm a 3rd or 4th generation, depending on which side of my family you look at, Portuguese-American. My family came over really early, but they've instilled all the Portuguese values and culture and traditions. So that's why I'm so involved in the Portuguese community. I thank my grandmother. She's the one that raised me and had me involved in everything. When there was 7 fraternal benefit clubs, she had me in each one. And that was my social calendar, a meeting here, a meeting there, official visit over here. So, I just stayed with it. I did take little breaks here or there as I got older for other opportunities, but eventually found my way back as it was. So, and, thank you for allowing me to be one of your panelists today.
Thank you for being here, Tisha. Appreciate all your work. Jerry.
Jerry Escobar. I'm based here in San Jose. I work for PFSA as a director of fraternal activities and marketing, and currently I'm the president of the San Jose Museum, who puts on the Dia Portugal celebration for the past 26 years. I am an immigrant, 1st generation Portuguese-American. My parents came from Ayala, and been living here in Santa Clara for the last 50-something years. And, generally have a passion and a love for my community, and sort of my day job is being an ambassador for the Portuguese culture. And then, of course, my hobbies almost always involve being Portuguese or going to festas or, just being involved in general Portuguese Heritage Night and things like that. So very happy to be here and appreciate being invited.
Thank you for being here, Jerry. And Dr. Monique Kelly-Vallance.
Hi there. I am let's see. I just most recently past Supreme President of the Portuguese-Fresno Society of America. Also past 2030's president. I am involved with the Modesto Portuguese Pentecost Association. I'm on the board of the Portuguese Education Foundation of Central California, the board of CPAC. I'm in a dance group. So I just love being Portuguese. And most people don't know I'm technically half Portuguese by blood, but as somebody has told me, I'm Portuguese from my head to my toes. So I just love everything about being Portuguese. And I just love to celebrate our culture and, kind of help people realize how unique and wonderful we all are in our culture and our history. And so I just like being involved in the community. And like Tisha, I was brought up going to meetings and, getting dragged from this festa, that festa. So it's just part of my nature, I guess.
It is, and you forgot the most important thing. Monique has a PhD in history,
Right.
in Portuguese history. So it's not, we don't have too many of those. It's the Portuguese-American community, not even masters. I don't think there's a lot of students who do masters in Portuguese or even Portuguese studies, which is one of the things that I'd like to discuss with all of you as well. So as we all know, the community is changing. And I think that all of you have been involved in one way or another with this change, or because whether in Monique's case, she was the president of PFSA while we got hit with a pandemic, so you had to be creative. And of course, Jerry's been involved, and the museum is also, in order for a museum to be alive, it has to adapt to different situations as the community changes. And Tisha, in a festa that sometimes had its dilemmas because there's not the community in Selma is not the same large community that it was maybe when the festa began, 100 plus years ago. But just this year, they had one of the biggest festas ever because she decided to take it to the American media. So there's all these things, and that's what I wanted to talk to you. How do you see this combination of tradition and innovation? I mean, some traditions, if we do not innovate them because we are in the 21st century and our younger people, and albeit all of you are younger, and those of your generation and the generation that follows you are very much into the this kind of a world, with the phones and the digital world and the and other ways to look at the community besides just going to just the festa. And I know that a lot of you have been even in the traditional festa trying to do something different. So I'm going to start with Monique this time. Monique, what's your thoughts on that? On keeping the traditions, and of course you're in everything from a folklore group talk about tradition to hall president or festa president and PFSA past president as well. How do we innovate with tradition, and any thoughts on that? And what have you seen that you have said, hey, this is kind of a cool idea, of taking this and going on to a different realm?
I think, the main thing that everyone has to keep in mind, or that, as we innovate is, what are our core values and our core traditions that can't be changed? And then what are things that we can change that don't change us as the essential essence of what it is for this society or for this tradition that we're trying to carry on? And I think that's where a lot of people, especially in the older generation, kind of get stuck, because in their minds, a lot of the things that we've brought in since the 1800s, and if we bring in like our fraternal societies, as an example, and the festas too, but we've carried on these certain traditions, and so they're afraid that if we change one certain thing, that is going to completely disrespect or change our traditions, and then we're no longer going to be the same. And I mean, they're right in the sense that we will change and we won't be the same. But as long as we don't change the core essence of what it means to be, as part of the Holy Spirit celebration or in our fraternal society, then innovation is very important. So if you look back to the festas when we did them in the 1800s, late 1800s, early 1900s, we do it very differently than we did back then. And people seem to forget that. What they remember is the last 30 years is the way we've always done it. We need to keep it the same way, or else if we change it, then we've somehow ruined something that we were left by our forefathers. But if you look back to the way our forefathers brought it from the Azores, we don't do it the same way they did it. And they didn't even do it the same way that they do it in the Azores. I mean, anyone who's been to the Azores and has gone to you see that the way they do it is different from what we do it. And so if we look at it that way, we say, okay, we've brought the festa to the United States, and in our case, California in particular, and I think we do it even differently from what they do in Massachusetts, for example. We kind of made it our own. We Americanized it. We brought the queens in, that's not something they do in the Azores beyond the day of the, being crowned, right? Just the different things that we've done, that we've made this festa American and Californian in some aspects. It never changed the spirit of why we do it. We still maintain the importance of the Holy Spirit and Queen St. Isabel as the forefront of what we're doing. And I think if we keep that in mind, then we shouldn't be afraid to change. Like you said, Denise, when we had the pandemic, there was a lot of things that we had to change. Look at this conference. We used to do this in person, and now we do it on Zoom, and we can reach so many more people with this than we could before. So we always have to kind of say, like, okay, if we're going to change something, can it be for the better? And we can't be afraid to try things just because we're afraid of, wrecking all of our history.
Thank you, Monique. Indeed. I mean, I was involved in these conferences, since before you were born. But anyway, so I've been involved in these conferences since the 1980s. And I recall, and I'm talking about in the 1990s, so a long time ago, about 27, 28 years ago, I recall distinctively at conferences, as you mentioned, now you reach many more people. So I wanted to comment on that, because I recall a conference that I was outside and making a call that I needed to make, in still the public phones, if you remember those, and I was asked, please, there's this dignitary from the Azores that's having a conference, because the Luso conference used to have like 3, different strands at the same time, sometimes 4, and he said, please go in there, because we have this gentleman from the Azores talking, and there's only 3 people there listening to him. And so, we had to scram to get another 4 or 5 to get a decent number of people listening to him. So, the handwriting had been on the wall for a while, and sometimes it takes a pandemic, it takes a tragedy for something to change. But Jerry, no tragedy had to occur for you to bring some different changes in different events, and that you are involved with, and some that, as you said, your day job, the PFSA is involved with heritage nights, with heritage events such as the one coming up in Pismo Beach, and a couple of things. How do you look at this, maintaining this tradition, but innovate? Because indeed, that's what our brothers and sisters in the Greek community, in the Armenian community, and other communities have now been doing for a while. Your thoughts?
Well, it's interesting you say the Greek community, because I think as we look at how we evolve our visibility in the world, it is sort of following these other cultures, the Italians, the Greeks. They're all doing great festivals, and so they're taking the best of their food, their sport, their music, and they're creating fun activities and fun approaches that aren't necessarily traditional that they may have done in Greece or in Italy or whatever. Same thing here. I think that these festivals are a great way to bring in generations, multiple generations. Heritage Night is the same way. It's all about sport. We all love sports, so you can bring your grandparents, kids. All generations get together while keeping the tradition and the pride of being Portuguese. So I think that's a key element, speaking a little bit to what Monique was talking about, is take the core pieces that are working, put those on a pedestal, keep them going, but also be unafraid to evolve how we move forward and engage younger audiences and things.
When you started looking at some of these things, Jerry, which feel free, of course, to say no comment, but how did you when you talked about these heritage nights and some of these things that, has there been any backlash? It's sometimes a certain aspect of the community that may say, hey, this is not the way we do things. We just do a festa. As Monique was saying, we just do a festa. We crown the queen on Saturday night, Sunday, and then we have this dance. And, why are we doing all of this stuff that, is not, quote unquote, maybe interpreted by some folks as very Portuguese? Has there been any kind of generational conflict, or people are pretty much, receiving it well?
Well, Heritage Nights 100% have been positive. I haven't heard a single thing saying you shouldn't be doing it because, again, we love sport and all the generations can come together. It's a way to get a grandparent to bring a grandkid along and enjoy something that is a Portuguese background. And as far as the festival goes, I haven't seen it. I think people have really embraced this. They've seen, they've all been to the Greek festivals and they say, well, why can't we have one of those? Well, we do. We're going to have 3 of them. We have San Jose is the original. We have the one in Turlock that PBSA is also a sponsor of with Carlos Vieira Foundation. And we're going to be doing the one down in Pismo on the 14th, first ever. So the big idea here is how do you get across California, sort of these really cool and fun things that engage not only Portuguese-Americans, but we're talking about all backgrounds together so that we can expose them to what the Portuguese culture is. I think it's a great opportunity at a very high level to get us all to unite, as well as sort of create, some marketing in a sense for the Portuguese culture.
Indeed. Tisha, your thoughts on the same idea and, innovates, with some of the tradition. And I know that this year you were part of a newscast on ABC, no, it was CBS, I believe, 47. And so you were one of the local news casts in the morning to talk about the Selma Festa, and it kind of changed the Festa to pleasantly surprise all of you, did it not?
Yes, it did. We randomly were reached out to by Medeiros Babs, the local TV station, who is Portuguese and wanted to promote Portuguese things. And we were there at the meeting and our secretary's telling us, hey, we have this invitation. No one jumped at it. And I was kind of like, waiting. And I said, okay, I'll do it if nobody else did. And I'll tell you, it was the most nervous I have ever been being out there. But, it's just different. This is a little more comfortable here. There's not so many lights. I'm in my home. It's okay. But there is totally different. It was also early in the morning, but I am an early riser. And I thought, what the heck, right? And I think that's what we have to do. If you do the same things over and over, you really can't expect a different result. So if you want to increase attendance or people knowing about something like our festa, and so I did it. And if it brought us more people, it did great. If it didn't, oh well, it's 15 minutes of my time. And she made it actually very comfortable, very nice. It was actually turned out better than I think I thought it would. And at festa, yeah, we had to set up extra tables. And I'm there running the auction and people are coming up to me. Oh, hey, you're the one that was on TV. That's how I knew about this festa. How long have you been here? It's like, well, festa's been here since 1907. Every Trinity Sunday since 1907, with the exception of 2020. But we've been here, and some of the people were from Selma. Some people came from Fresno. They came from other areas. So it was just trying something new and being open to it. I also think for like a younger generation, when I was Grand President of SPRSI, there was younger people that wanted to be involved. But you had a generation that was retired and maybe they didn't like to drive at night. So they're holding all of their meetings Tuesday afternoon, or they're having a breakfast meeting at Denny's. Well, a younger generation works or goes to school and they can't participate. And some were innovative to where 1 month they meet in the afternoon, the next month they meet at night, and they made it work. Others held very sternly to, nope, Denny's at noon, come if you can or not. So it's adapting to invite more people. I think for us here at the hall in Selma, we would have never considered, calling into a meeting. But the pandemic brought about, well, hey, we have to have phone calls now or Zoom. And it opens up to where you can have people from outside. Our senior queen this coming year, she's actually from Manteca. Because, we didn't have a queen, and I saw on Facebook and she was interested. And so social media helps us, all these things that we haven't had. And I think everyone has been a little afraid just because they didn't know, so it's taking those leaps, taking those challenges, we wouldn't be here in America if our parents, or in my case, two great grandparents, didn't decide to take a leap for one reason or another and try a new country. So it's trying new things, adapting, but you can still keep everything of the culture alive. Just because we air the rosary now Facebook Live so more people can attend, it doesn't mean you're taking any away from the Catholic faith or anything away from the meaning of the rosary. You're just bringing in more people, and definitely outside the Portuguese culture. I talk a lot about our Portuguese events at my Lions Club. And one of the ladies there just on Tuesday when I was at the meeting was like, well, I think we're all official Portuguese now. And I said, absolutely. If you love the culture, you love us, just come on down. We'll let you come in. We're open to everybody.
That hasn't always been like that, as you said, open to everybody. A lot of times that's been one of our issues throughout the years, is that sometimes we kind of closed ourselves within our own little world, to call it, our own little neighborhood, even if the neighborhood was the whole city of that you lived in, but it was the Portuguese and the Portuguese only. And I'm of the generation that I remember inviting folks who were not Portuguese to go to a festa and sitting at the table and someone saying, why are those people here? This is a Portuguese event and they are not Portuguese. And this wasn't that long ago. This was maybe about, it's a long time ago, but when you get older, time elapses a little bit different. But, this wasn't my grandfather's time. Okay. So this was maybe probably more than likely around 30 to 32 years ago. And so it was, 3 decades ago. Monique, we'll start with you again and ask you a little bit about, and especially because you're a historian. So how do we pass the history, and to the younger audiences? How do you make them want to understand, as it was put, and Jerry saw our documentary that we put forth here day before yesterday on Tuesday, and as one person said, I was fortunate when I was queen. This was a past queen. She was queen of, I think, in the late 90s. So I was fortunate that they brought in a priest from another parish. I think actually the priest had come from the Azores, and he gave kind of a workshop to the queens. And I don't know if she remembers that, but she said, he kind of gave a workshop, which was something that nobody else had done before. And it's just how I learned all of this about the festa, because a lot of times it's just wearing the crown, the fancy cape, and and that's all part of it. But then there's a reason for it, so as a historian, what can we do more and more to pass this history in a non-boring way, like you do in a classroom? Because I would have loved to take a history class from you. I think we're pretty. I think me in the language and you in history, we just should team up and do a class.
Agree.
But I believe that indeed, how do we put this forth in a way that's engaging? I know that the heritage events that Jerry was talking about is one way, because, people they don't feel like they have to sit there and just, be all proper with a shirt and tie. They can, they can wear their tennis shoes and go try, maybe there's, 7 or 8 different kinds of food, and you just don't want to eat sopers. You want to try tramos, or you want to do this, or you want to do that. So in your thoughts, and as your experience as a historian, because I believe that a lot of times if we don't pass this history, it's going to die, because if people don't know what it represents, then, hey, I'm just going to make soppers at home.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think part of it is that our Portuguese community has to catch up with our current American culture. And that's something there's been a big resistance to that, because I know, like, at least when I was growing up in the 90s, or the 80s, and I was a teenager in the 90s, I felt like, we were here and the Americans were here. It's like, can't hang out with your friends from school, get to go to the festa. And I think that our generation now is swung so far the other way, because some people really resented that, and they said, oh, I'm gonna let my kids do whatever they want. Then I think the big problem is that, again, this generational divide, where our education system has changed so much that we don't teach our kids today the way that we did in the 50s. So, we don't have like rote memorization. You memorize this and do this. You do this because you have to do it. Now we encourage kids to sit in groups and work on group projects. We encourage them to think critically, but yet when it comes to the Portuguese things, we don't try to explain it to them or try to make it fun or interesting, because it's almost like we take offense. Like, what do you mean this is boring to you? Like, you need to do this or else we need to continue our Portuguese culture, right? And so it's like we have to kind of meet them where they are. So, like you were saying, Denise, like I think the most important thing is to explain to the kids, like, why do we do this? So as an example, I'm not a young person anymore, but when I was Supreme President, so there's something that PFSA and Luso also participates as well, where we have the statue, the immigrant statue in Root Park in San Leandro. And every year, the Supreme President, PFSA and Luso put on a thing, and we come, we hang a wreath and then give a speech, right? So when it was my turn to do it, I thought, why do I have to do this? This is really weird. Like, what is the statue? What does it represent? And why do we put a wreath here? And why do I have to stand in front of it and give a speech? Like, this is really strange. And so, I mean, if I'm going to do it because I have to do it, I don't want people to get upset. But at the same time, I don't like to do things if I don't know why I do it. So I actually went back and researched the history of the statue to find out that, like, this statue was actually the result of a bunch of Portuguese Americans all over the state, from San Diego all the way up north, getting together, collecting money. And then they went and took it to the state Senate and got Portuguese Immigrant Week established as on the state, like as a state holiday or a state, commemoration that we do every year. I had no idea. I was really amazed when I found out just the efforts to even bring that statue from Portugal to California. And I was just like, this is something that if we told people about this, maybe they would be more interested in it. Whereas, like, instead of it's just like, okay, this is what we do. Come on, go over here, do what you have to do. Now shut up and, all that stuff. And I just don't like that. And I feel like that's probably why a lot of our kids might feel that way too. Like, why do I have to come over here and do this? Why is this important? And the only answer they seem to get is because you need to continue your Portuguese culture. So just be quiet and do what you're told. And they're not raised like that anymore. So then they like naturally fight against it. So if we explain to them, like, this is the origin of our Holy Spirit tradition, and this is how it's changed. And maybe some people, older people, need to educate themselves a little bit more too, because they may not even know, then if we educate our community about why we do the things that we do, then maybe our kids will see how awesome it is and want to continue it on their own and not have to be forced.
Indeed, and sometimes not be too critical, because when I was in high school, I had my Portuguese 4 had a dance, which Tisha knows is seen. We had a dance. Part of our Portuguese 4 class was a dance group, and in the 15 years I did that, I had over 600 students, learned Azorian folklore. But every time we would present something, people would, some of the students said, I don't know if I want to go present in any. I want to go to the Tulare County Fair, or the Fresno County Fair, or the Stanislaus Fair. I don't want to go to the Portuguese Festivals because they're always criticizing because we took a wrong step here, Hey, people, So sometimes we are a bit overcritical, and young people need to be, nourished. I mean, if they're wrong, they're wrong, but but not in a chastising way. Indeed, that is the issue. And Jerry, so do you think with these festivals and some of the things, that people have an opportunity, at a table and a booth to talk to people and actually learn a little bit more, that, the history can be passed on in a different manner? Maybe it's not, a full class, setting, where you sit there and, tell about the history of the Azores or of the mainland Portugal or of whatever for 45 to 55 minutes. But, people can pick up bits and pieces and answer maybe some of those questions that they have. So the same kind of question to you, which is, how do we pass on this to future generations? Because Californians are now in 500 cities. We're no longer all just living in San Jose, Modesto, Turlock, Tulare, and Artesia, San Diego. In the Bay Area, we're in every single city. Some cities that didn't have Portuguese. We're up north, we're down south, we're in different towns, even here in the Valley. So how do we put efforts you see that can put forth through PFSA, Luso, all the different statewide organizations, the local organizations, to pass on this history and to pass on the identity, especially what is it, to be in Portuguese. Any thoughts to add to what our historian, she's a specialist, but the rest of us also have an opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I think you talked about the heritage nights, you talked about the festivals. I think the key idea here is find something, create engaging experiences so that it sort of wakes up an interest, So I think whether it's cooking classes, whether it's, folkloric dance, whatever it may be, there's something that might trigger, and everybody's different. So maybe there's something to trigger an interest. And so that would create an interest to go, well, let me go research this a little bit more and maybe get them involved. And the more we can get people to sort of wake up and start to, identify with being Portuguese, be proud to be Portuguese, I think that is the beginning of it. And then to your point earlier, once the youth start getting involved, then you need to empower them and say, you know what, you're the experts, it's your generation. You take this thing that you sort of fell in love with, that you started to get an interest in, and then take it to the next level. And for the rest of us to sort of like stay out of it and not derail that interest and that passion that they have. So it's really about empowering and then letting them run with it, to our earlier comments.
Do you think there's that appetite? I mean, you see the older generation letting go willingly or unwillingly sometime, but you do see that at least the generation, I'm not talking about generation who's 85 or 90, but I'm talking the generation, but that is in maybe their late 50s and to 70s. I see down here in our part of the world, I see that generation that's say between 55 and 70 a bit more relaxed about passing than the generation before us. And I'm not saying that because I'm in that generation, but I am saying that there was, to me, a conflict of exactly what Monique said, and we go by generation, people who may be now, between 72 and 92, it was tough for them to let go. I see a bit more in this part of the valley that the people 55 to 70 are a bit more relaxed about letting go. What is your experience from what you see throughout the state?
Yeah, I mean, I just speaking for Santa Clara, for example, I see the hall, a lot of Santa Clara Hall here. These organizations have youth. Well, when I say youth, I'm talking about people who are in their 20s, 30s, taking leadership roles, and I think that's absolutely perfect. So yeah, I would say probably back when I was younger, going to the hall every weekend, there was none of that, and you had to do it the way we did is the way you got to do it. And if you tried a new idea, it's like they'd stop you. And I think now there's a lot of openness to these new ideas. And I think this is what needs to happen. It's sort of inevitable if we want to continue to have these halls and these activities throughout California.
Tisha, how do you in Selma, with a community that's not as large as it was 100 some odd years ago, as you said, a lot of people moved and there's not the dairies that there at one time, there's probably a couple of dozen dairies just in the Selma area. Now there are hardly any, if any at all. How I know that you've had some success bringing in folks who are not Portuguese to the hall, and that is just as important as bringing sometimes the younger generation, especially because then, I mean, exactly what Monique said, most of my students who are Portuguese here at Fresno State, they're not just Portuguese. There are very few of them that are just, they're either half or a quarter or an eighth, and so how have your efforts gone forth in bringing other folks that are not Portuguese to the festa? Because when we were there to film the documentary, the B-roll that we shot there, I saw probably a lot of people that I didn't, not just because I didn't know, because I don't know everybody in the Portuguese-American community, obviously, but people who were not of Portuguese background. I saw Asian Americans, I saw African Americans, I saw Hispanic Americans.
Yeah. So in Selma, we run off of a board of 11 people, and I think right now 3 are not Portuguese at all. They're involved because of through marriage, or they just came and they sometimes came to an event or something and wanted to get involved. But I think that's the key. It's just getting people there, and like you said, not being critical, which is really tough. Not just so much, I think, for an older generation. I find myself, as I'm getting older, I'm turning more and more into my grandmother, which is not a bad thing, but I am getting just more critical on things, short-tempered, just something that comes, and I have to take a step back and be like, hold up, you didn't like this when you were younger. You didn't like being, so treated differently, or the tone of voice you use. So I think it makes a big difference just to go in there and just be open and just start with an invitation, but you're right, at the Salma Festa, our community here in Salma is mostly Hispanic. In fact, of our 11 board members, only 2 of us actually live in Salma. The rest come from outside of the town. And it's just because they saw a need, I think, part of it. Maybe they were queen here. And then now we're like, hey, we're struggling. Okay, let me come back and let me help out. Or you just ask, you pull in your friends, hey, I need help. Can you just help me? And then they get a kick out of helping for the day, like serving drinks or something. Because we are a small committee here. So it's just asking for help, and maybe people like it. For us here with the Festa, it's the food. The soapish, those guys do such a great job. It's so good. They just come back year after year. I'll start getting, at the beginning of the year, when again is Festa? And it's like Trinity Sunday every year. Just Google it, Trinity Sunday. But I think getting the younger involved it's tricky. I can speak for, I have a nephew, and I'm half Portuguese, so he's a quarter Portuguese. Technically 43% according to my ancestry, but we'll go with half. It's more impressive. But as when he was little, it was just getting him to do little things like, hey, help make some lemonade, help take this stuff out. And then he liked helping, and having the hall be a fun place to go, thinking he's going to see other kids there. He's going to play. Yeah, there's things to help with and work, but it can be a fun place. So he likes going to the building. It's taking little baby steps to get them to enjoy it. And then now he asks, hey, when's the next thing at the hall? How can I help? And then now that he is, he's in 6th grade, now you tell him a little bit, like Monique was saying, you tell them a little bit more about the history. Hey, so now you've been to 10 festas. Do you know why we do them? And you tell him the stories, and then he has an interest now. He's like, oh, really? And it's the cutest thing to see him go somewhere and try to retell the story. It's not always perfect, but he does his best. And in fact, the other day we were at Teppanyaki, and he just felt the need to tell the cook that he was Portuguese, and we do this and we do that. And I was like, oh wow, I'm very proud of the little guy. But it's just the keeping them involved. And if they have ideas and they're younger, the older generation was often like, well, no, or maybe they'll tell you, it used to happen to me. We've tried that, it didn't work. Well, you tried it 20 years ago. Let's try it again. If it doesn't work, okay. But it might. And so we have a lot of new fundraisers that we do at the hall just because someone had the idea. To do it, and we ran with it, and now it's successful for us. You just got to try new things, and I think the key thing is really not to be critical, and just keep people involved. And in our festa this year, one of the ladies that helps us out at the hall, Hispanic, but she wanted her grandkids to carry the rosary in the festa. And I was like, all right, let's do it. I'll put it back together, and it was just like, she wanted to pass it on because she enjoys coming and helping and doing things. And she wanted to pass it on to her kids and her grandkids, so it's just, we're a fun bunch of people. It doesn't take much to fall in love with us. So.
Some of us. No, I'm just kidding. As we turn and we come to the last few minutes, I wanted to ask you a couple of things. And it was, of course, as I mentioned in all of the different panels, we try to, of course, send our panelists questions. Not that any of these people would need questions. They can talk about the Portuguese community for hours. But, recently, the president of Portugal caused an uproar in Portugal. For those of you who follow Portuguese news, it was kind of funny to see it. But in the East Coast, he said, we are bacalhau, cozida à portuguesa, vira, fado, fandango, and Cristiano Ronaldo. He did mention Cristiano Ronaldo. And so it caused an uproar because some people in Portugal thought that he was basically talking about simple-minded people that just do this kind of stuff. And in a way, we do also have to be careful. Monique and I discussed this several times when we did our radio history project, which is you have to be careful with stereotypes. you have to be careful that we aren't, in this case for California, maybe Vida and Fandango wouldn't work as much, but Chamarrita, and Zapateia, and Sopas, certainly, the Cozido à Portuguesa, but certainly the Sopas, and certainly maybe not, the Bacalhau is universal, of course, but maybe, in California, you could say, hey, we are, Sopas, Chamarrita and Bifanas. And so, but we are more than that. And we are, and we have, as here in this panel, and we have people that like the Chamarrita and the Bifanas and the Sopas, but they're historians and they're professional marketing folks, and they have, and they're engineers, and they have, bachelors and masters and PhDs and things like that. And sometimes we're not, focusing on that as well. How do we, and I'll start with Monique again, give her the hot potato. How do we build community, but at the same time avoid these stereotypes that you and I talked so much about? I mean, no one should be ashamed of liking Sopas. The only reason sometimes I'm ashamed is because of the weight I put on with them. But no one should be ashamed of liking a Bifana, but we are more than the Bifana. We are more than the Chamarrita, even in a dance. I mean, Monique dances Azores folklore. She knows that there's 20 some dances, minimum. So it's not just one. How do we build community and at the same time avoid these stereotypes and tell Portugal, in this case, even the president, that's okay, that, hey, we are our own community. As you mentioned, Monique, the festas are totally different. And I can just, end by quoting yesterday someone that I think we all know, which is Liz Mota from very involved with Luso. Liz was here at our documentary showing, as was Tisha, of course, and Jerry, and she said, one of my surprises when I was younger was that I would go to all these festas, and then my parents took me to mainland Portugal, and I'm looking for these festas, and there's not a single one of them like this. I mean, there isn't, and even in the Azores, the festas Spiritu are different than ours. We created our own identity, and we should not be ashamed of that. So Monique, what are your thoughts? How do we build identity, and go past the typical stereotypes so we don't get in that circle, because that of course won't take us anywhere either.
Well, I mean, it's always like, I guess I keep coming back to education. I mean, if we only have our events and we only do Chamarrita and we only serve Sopas and we only do these sorts of things, then yeah, we're going to be stereotyped because nobody knows any differently. There's no education out there, even amongst our own community. And so I think, there's nothing wrong with loving that stuff. I love to dance Chamarrita. But, we have to also kind of introduce newer ideas in there. So if you sometimes, like when people, especially here in the Valley, they say, oh, fado never works. Nobody likes the fado in the Central Valley. But that may not be true. I think it's kind of like with kids with vegetables. So if you tell them they're not going to like their vegetables, of course they're not going to like their vegetables. But at PFSA, we had a fado symposium a few years ago, and we had David Garcia, and we had Angela Brit, and we had, Helder Cavalera and Alcino and Steve Swash, and they came, and instead of doing your traditional fado performance, they actually taught us about fado. They taught us the difference between fado from Coimbra and in Lisbon. The musicians explained their instruments, and the guitarra, they has to be played every single day or else they forget. I mean, they talk about the different types of instruments and the music and why they sing it and what it's about. And then they actually explained the song before they sang it. And I thought to myself, the reason why probably a lot of people don't like fado is because they don't understand what's being sung about, and they don't understand it. So then there's kind of already that natural tendency to not like it or want to even know more about it. And I think that could be true for a lot of our cultural, a lot of the beautiful cultural things that we have in the Portuguese culture, is that, we can entice people in with what they already know and they know they're going to like, but then add something else and be like, hey, since you're here, why don't we try this? And just kind of open people's eyes. And if they don't like it, they don't like it. You don't have to like fado or anything else, but we should introduce, people to it and make them aware of it so that they realize that, our culture is a much richer tapestry than what we kind of get in this zone of bullfights and, Chamarrita and Sopas. And then we start to think that that's all there is, because we don't tell them that there's anything different, and we don't show them, or we assume that they're not going to like it. Like, oh, they're going to find that boring, so we're not going to tell them. But if you know, like kind of like we've been kind of sort of this theme that we've been talking about all along, is if you present it to people in a way that's interesting, and put it alongside something they already like, then you can open some people's eyes and say, oh, even if I don't like it, I know that there's also these other things out there that people can enjoy. And there's more to being Portuguese than just going to the festa every Sunday.
Indeed. And building upon that, Jerry, you know, you've been involved, and all of you and Monique especially, with the, you know, with some of the different events, including the Portuguese kids who, you know, some people love, some people don't, but, you know, some people like comedy, some people don't like comedy, some people like dancers carnaval, others hate them, you know, so, but you know, I think their humor is important because it kind of, you know, it kind of makes us look at ourselves and laugh at ourselves, which that's very important, and that's very important to grow as human beings. And also because I think in a roundabout way, by using stereotypes, they abolish stereotypes. And so your thoughts on, you know, going beyond exactly what Monique just said. There's more to being Portuguese than just to going to the festa once a year. I think that's part of our problem. A lot of people are just happy to going once a year, and then when we want to build all the other events that are important for us, it doesn't happen. But your thought on these stereotypes, and you know how people like the Portuguese kids and others have kind of, you know, made us laugh at ourselves and abolish some of these things.
Well, I think those guys have done a great job. I mean, great leaders in the community. And what they've done is, again, sort of opened up the Portuguese community to the rest of the world through their comedy. And I think it's a great start. My angle was sort of looking at things a little differently. We always look at Portuguese traditions from California's perspective as whatever it is that our parents brought over in 1960, and that sort of approach. And I say what's interesting, and I think a lot of us miss this, is there's a Portugal out there that is not the Portugal that I think Portugal is. And so I think the more that we can start looking back to Portugal today, and being here in the Silicon Valley, you think about how innovative those guys are, what they're doing over there in Portugal, what we're doing here, and the more that we can sort of commingle West Coast of the United States, the West Coast of Europe, and promote all the new stuff that's happening. I think that's a big way that we can shift it, because it's not just about necessarily the traditions we've been talking about today. There's all kinds of new technologies, there's all kinds of new music. The food scene that's going on in Portugal is huge. So there's an opportunity, I think, through social media, through what you do with video multimedia, like you do with PBBI. There's an opportunity to sort of get that message out, to get more people aware of something that's a little bit different, just a completely different approach. It's saying, like, it's not just the traditional approach that was brought over, 50, 60 years ago. There's a lot of great stuff there. And how do we get the new Portugal combined with some of our traditional views of what we're doing here in California? So.
Indeed, and that's always surprising. We just had 4 students, as all of you know, from the University of the Azores here, and they met with their young people, and the younger people here in California were kind of surprised because a couple of them said, they're interested, but they don't go to bullfights. And they said, what do you mean you're interested and you don't go to bullfights? I mean, and he said, no, I don't care for them. I don't go to them. And so sometimes we have these. There's a new Portugal. I mean, the music that they listen to, they were surprised as well. It's the same music that our kids are listening to here too. They thought, our young people thought that they were all just listening, to Rosa Redonda Saia, back and forth again. But they're listening to the same music. They're listening to the, maybe it's a Portuguese rap music, but maybe it's not. There's more American music. As a matter of fact, one of the young people who spoke very well English, he said, how did he learn it? Through Netflix and through music, because he watches everything in English and with subtitles, and he listens to Portuguese music. So indeed, we kind of, and sometimes in our festas, and I'm glad you mentioned that, sometimes in our festas we bring The same thing. We bring a folklore group. I always say we have 12 folklore groups in California. They're all pretty darn good. So let's bring a rap artist that we've never heard before from Portugal. Let's bring a rock group that we've never heard before. Let's bring a painter that we've never seen, or some. And the food, the same thing. Let's look at maybe the different kinds of creativity that's going on. That's a very good idea, and I'd like to see that more also in the community. But you hit it on. It's important that we know the good and the bad of the modern Portugal, not just the good and the bad of the Portugal that was brought over by our parents or our grandparents. Indeed. Tisha, your thoughts also on stereotypes. How do we go beyond them? Because sometimes, as a matter of fact, never forget that when I was in the high school, and it used to be the I think it's a bit different now, but it used to be the sophomore year that you would go talk to your guidance counselor about what you thought you wanted to be, when you finished high school and what you want to do. And I went, and I was actually at that time was freshman year, and I went and I asked him, and he said, "What do you think you'd like to be?" And I said, "I think I'd like to be a teacher." And I had only been here 4.5 years, and he said, because I came at 10, and he said, "You're Portuguese." And I said, "Yes, I am." He says, "You handle yourself very well." I said, "Well, thank you." And he said, "You could be a hay salesman." Because all the Portuguese here in the Central Valley were in the dairy business, and I guess I could sell something. He didn't, I don't think he was a very nice man, and I liked him dearly, but I don't think he did it out of malice. But it's just that's the stereotype that we were. What do you mean you want to be a teacher? Portuguese are in the dairy business, dude. So how do we also break not just with ourselves, but to others as well? I mean, we're not all, even in the Bay Area, when there were dairies in the Bay Area, 100 years ago, not all Portuguese were in the dairy industry. They were already out there doing different things. So how do we also from a different aspect, I would ask you, how do we also break these stereotypes that sometimes the American community has about us?
Yeah, well, I think I agree with Monique. Education is always key to anything. And I think as well with us, I don't think we necessarily promote ourselves very well. I mean, if someone, like here in our local newspaper, well, it's truly not a paper anymore. I think it's just online. But, the only thing you ever see about our hall is at Fresno time. So all you're ever going to think about our hall is that, oh, once a year, they have this big thing. I go eat, I'm done. They don't see how we give back to the community because we don't necessarily promote it. We just do it. Like, they don't see that we're giving the hall to the high school cheerleaders to do fundraisers, or that we're feeding the senior citizens. We're opening the hall the day before Thanksgiving this year because the senior center has some issues here in town, and we're providing the hall to have the senior Thanksgiving dinner that they normally have at the senior center. We're going to have it that the Lions Club and the whole community comes together to participate in. You don't see those things. We just do them because, we're taught to do things and to give back. And the things like the soapish and the festas, that's just our way of having fun. We work hard. We do, like you said, we're engineers, we're doctors, we're lawyers, we're every profession there is in the world, no doubt. But, when it comes to have fun, we like to go back to our roots. We like to go back to the dancing, to the music, to the food. And we look forward to that. To me, that's the relaxation time. Even though when you're on a festa committee, it's not so much relaxing time. But when you do get those moments to actually go and step, that's how you relax. But then that's what's advertised. That's what's seen. All the things you do through Fresno State and PBBI, you're great at advertising and promoting. But maybe the Portuguese community needs to help you a little more, and we need to promote the PBBI more so they know about these oral history projects, and they know about the exchange students, program you have. Like, I know about it because I'm close to Fresno, but with the people on the East Coast, how much do they know about it? But, what would it take to get more publicity and show like, look, no, we're just not all parties. We're trying to make an impact in the community we live in now in California that presents our roots, which are Portugal or the Azores as well, and combine the two together. And that's really what we're trying to do. And we are more than just festas and sopish and awesome food.
Well, we're just about out of time. I want to thank all three of you. I don't know if there's any final thoughts from all of you. Thanks, Tisha, for the nice comment on behalf of PBBI. I mean, what we do is different. We don't do a festa, but we don't need another festa, in California. So, but we kind of have our own little things, of course. But I do believe that it is important that we register our oral history, that we create our own narratives. Very proud of all the work, and thank you, Tisha, for your allowing us to record lots of things at Selma. Thanks to Jerry and also Monique, because PFSA, without me asking, I've never asked PFSA for something. I mean, I've asked for something, to do events there, and it's always been with open arms, and I appreciate that. But I have to say that PFSA has been one of the very few, if not the only, statewide organization that has sponsored us with a check without us even asking about it. Maybe we should ask, and maybe we should, do that. But they have, and I'm appreciative of that, because when someone gives you something and you didn't even make a call for it, that to me and to the university tells us that they're interested, and they value. So I want to thank all three of you. I want to thank Monique and Jerry and Tisha. Thanks for all you do. Thanks for your innovative spirit. Thanks for your commitment to tradition, to a different phase. I think that that's important. I think that, as Monique said, we can't put these things by the wayside, but we need to bring them into the younger generation. And as Tisha said as well, make these, even the festas, make them fun for kids. I mean, it's just, oh my God, I have to go to the festa now. And as Jerry mentioned, bringing in all of these other things, the new Portugal, with its good and its bad. I mean, it's, there's, for example, the other day I was at an event and I was talking about some of the issues that we have in the Azores. The Azores, unfortunately, because it's a land where I was born, and I know all of you have roots there as well, the Azores still has 29% of their students that drop out of high school, 29%. So yeah, it's wow, indeed, Monique. I mean, at national level, Portugal's, I think, about 11 or 12. And so we're almost triple. I mean, even in the Azorean community, we don't have 29% dropping out of high school, and haven't had it for a long time. And so we have these issues that, Portugal has, that we also need to learn about, because I think, as it was mentioned by all of you, there is, and I keep on telling the Azores, there's a lot of know-how in California, and of course the East Coast as well. But there's a lot of know-how in California that could help the Azores grow as well. So I think it's like Jerry said, bringing the new here and bringing what's new here also to them, because it can be helpful both ways on this side. So thanks you to all three of you. Any final comments? I'm open to anybody. If not, we want to thank you all.
Thank you for all you do.
Oh, no.
The community. I mean, I would say that you're doing a great job. PBBI is awesome, and you never stop. So thank you very much.
Thank you for attending. We will probably talk to you though about doing a premiere of the documentary at the PFSA, that lovely library that you have.
All right, you bet.
I was going to say, you need to do like we've been lecturing the festas. You need to get somebody in training so that they could follow in your footsteps, because
well, if you want to,
you do a lot.
If you want to leave the CTA business and come to the academic world, but we do have a couple of young people here that I'm hopeful. Yeah, we do that, and that's needed, as a matter of fact, and that's also needed, as a matter of fact, when it comes to us doing. Because, as I mentioned, Monique is, that I know of, the only American of Portuguese ancestry that has a PhD in Portuguese history. But more and more students are doing master's programs, as all of you know. A bachelor's is not enough, it seems like, anymore. So kids do, young people do master's program, and a lot of them do it in sociology or any other areas of the social sciences. And sometimes I think that we should create with some of the wealth that we have, and the community does have some wealth, we should create a large endowment kind of a thing, not just for Fresno State. I'm not just for everybody, that if a student wants to do a study on the capes of the Portuguese festas, that we actually have an academic study, that we could help him or her do that. We could say, hey, listen, you're going to spend about $25,000 in your master's, we have this funding available, not all of it, but we have a certain percentage. That's what's happening with the Armenian community. The Armenian community is really doing academic work because somebody created these opportunities. So we are lacking, unfortunately. Thank you
I think
all.
we need a Portuguese think tank.
Well, I'm creating that, and I want you to be on it, all three of you. So we not a Portuguese, but it's more directed at the Azores, but it's the same thing. We're working with the Azores and but I think we do need a think tank. I agree with you. Yeah, that's a great comment for our concluding statements. Thank you, Monique, for doing that. Thank you all three very, very much for all you do and for being good friends. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you all for joining us.
Thank you. Bye-bye.